want today to share a wonderful treat with you, the poetry of Jamey Hecht. What I love most about his poetry is the darkness and the sharpness and the hint of pepper in his voice that give a broad range of emotion and feeling, and that have the power to evoke in me, and I hope in you, feelings and thoughts never had before. So with that, add a little quote from Walt Whitman, who is one of my currently favorite poets, again, and it goes like this. I believe in you, my soul. The other I must not abase itself to you, and you must not be abased to the other. Loaf with me on the grass. Loose the stop from your throat. Not words, not music or rhyme I want, not custom or lecture, not even the best. Only the lull I like, the hum of your velvet voice. Okay. With that, let's listen to the poetry itself.
Thank you very much. It's a beautiful introduction, which I much appreciate. Whitman also said, I might not tell everyone, but I will tell you. And the book is perhaps a bit more revealing than I would choose today. But I made the selection, and now the book itself feels like an artifact of the past. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to share some of these poems with you. First is one from the Homeric tradition about the story of Odysseus and the Sirens in the Odyssey, and it was published in a beautiful publication that I very much respect called Arion a few years ago. The Sirens is on page 35 in this beautifully produced book from International Psychoanalytic Books, Dodo Feathers. The poem is in two parts, and as I think you can hear, the first part is before and the second after Odysseus hears the song of the Sirens. And what the Sirens sing about always is the life and career and achievements and sorrows of the person to whom they are singing. And this mirroring is part of why it's so spellbinding to hear them. It's so difficult to pull away. The Sirens. It is not right that Circe's words should enter my ears only. Secret from you men who pull your hearts out at my oars, shot at, beaten brainless by the Cyclops I provoked, driven by Poseidon's stormy hate. So I will tell you. We will come soon to the island of the sister Sirens, standing in their flowery meadow, where about their feet lie violets, lilies, lemongrass, teeth, and fingers of the sailors who, before us, landed on their dreamy strand for music. There lay they long repenting of it, yet from inside that music they could not go back. And as this music built a world of towers, stairways, halls inside their minds, their bellies cried for food until their bodies failed. So, with these bolts of braided cord, must you now tie me to the ship, lashing my trunk to the olive pole, whereon our sail waits for the wind. That is not all. Circe instructs me, I must fill your ears with beeswax now, lest when our black ship slides beside their pretty field, the sweet airs pour from their twin throats into you all, to steal away your wits forever, with all of Ithaca Children, wives, possessions, friends, all memories of love dissolved into their music like one wave into the next. Sailor after sailor, life collapsing into story, persons into memory, memory into endless dream, unspeakable. 2. Disappointing somehow, though correct about my record in the war, my kills, my wounds, my old scar from the forest. Their song is greater than my tale of pain, their voices feminine, more searching than these dying ships that chase the pole star on his speeding way. Most of what they sang was true. Dolan I murdered. I stole the great black ram from Polyphemus and his eyesight. Yes, I spend my men like money. Yes, I killed the stag that fed my starving men, whose friends were eaten raw by giants. Mine was the scheme for the hollow horse. And when I found myself an isolate, hemmed in by the Lycian ranks, I fought my way to no man's land between the armies, and my name for some time vanished from my mind. Though all up and down, I searched for it. All this happened as the Sirens said. But then they pushed their music on in deeper into my heart's ear, into the dark below my mind, so that my blood was poisoned and perfumed with this mazy melody and harmony mingling, while this enthralling chord of fire was weaving in their voices on the air twin streams of endless breath. Above the meadow and the waves, I listened to the music and became a slave. I saw the arms of Eurylochus rowing. I saw beside him others rowing along, and the island moved away, and the twin sisters singing receded so swiftly, so suddenly did the spell break that I heard my own voice shouting, "Untie me, untie me, untie me," though meanwhile inside I was praying to Athena that we get clear of the island of those 2 sirens. I'd like to read some short ones from this book now. The Late Beach, which if you have the book, it's on page 53. Look what recent trash and trinkets circle the bent litter basket, cast wide of it into the shade beside it on the sand. Here's a rubber band, the handle from a radio. Leaflets go, hover, wait, fall off the wind's convex invisible face, dissolve in the loud cold waves. Gulls raise the chalice of the breeze, turns keen in layers of the air. A green rag rides the tide. Cups and matches, coins, pistachios that would not open, poison clams closed and broken pencil buried in the sand. The Ride. This is the earliest poem in the whole book. I was a little boy. I was, in 1989, I was a 21-year-old man who said, this is from riding Long Island Railroad after dark. This late in the ride, the sun is nearly gone, though light enough remains to show the fields, wild grass with endless water ending in sudden hills beyond, and past them wild grass again, teeming in the blue obscure. Now houses light themselves behind the trees, disclose the brief interiors and disappear as hills and darkness open to the train. Pencil sharpener. It's a still life. And these little object poems. And these are fun to write because your eye will light upon some object. You quite arbitrarily assign this to yourself, and the playful character of it, because it's just what the hell, I shall write this poem, is very liberating. You wind up saying something about it you did not know before you wrote the poem. Pencil sharpener. I should maybe mention, as a little boy, I watched my father write the books that put food on our table on legal pads with these pencils, and he would grind the pencils with this little hand crank thing. It was a metal, and I loved it because you could open up and look. Housed in a bulbous shell, a tube of gray black razor blades waits in the dark for the next one. Pencils come and go, asleep, unwilling and incapable of work. They leave, alive and terrified, as sharp as new-made nails, churned by hand or motorized. Gears shave away the jaded past, lay bare the graphite in the wood, and leave for trash the shed skins of long dead pine, its tendrils corkscrewed in the vestibule. Work now, tortured pencil, deaf instrument worn down to uselessness and back by work. Its mark brought back from blank to black. Pencil sharpener. Perhaps you are familiar with the work of the American poet laureate Billy Collins. Yeah, sometime poet laureate. Well, I love his work, and I also saw fit to poke at it with a tribute called Homage to Billy Collins. Billy Collins could not be here this morning, so I am writing his poem for him. In it, a dog sleeps beside a tree while that little girl from the painting by De Chirico chases her almost silent hoop. And you are there. And from his window, Billy Collins sees you and, too busy writing a much better poem than this one, wonders for a moment how you got here and why you are wearing his bathrobe. Kind of sheen of easy and simple domestic comforts around this very philosophical poet of daily life. So I sort of went after him. Yeah, Billy. The next two poems will, I think, hold some appeal for psychoanalysts because they're rather plainly about the first one about trauma and the second about projection, and they're both about flies, quite unpleasant. The first one is called The Death of the Fly, and the second one is called Fly Killing. The death of the fly. Through the frog's throat, the fly goes buzzing madly, wet wings folded useless in the foreign slime, and Trauma's telescoped equations slow down time into a million razor-thin splinters of panic, moving through the dying bug, still struggling to be free or dead, but not enveloped anymore in acid darkness, burning all over, violated. The fly's complicated body fails. Its spirit, simple, shakes once and sifts its way outside. Death of the fly. Fly killing. This poem is about the experience of having a housefly in your home, watching yourself compassionate toward this insect, considering maybe trying to get rid of it without killing it, and on the other hand, being taken over by feelings far more primitive, hostile, and aggressive than those. With a thin sliver of self left over to observe this process, eventually writing the poem, Fly Killing. I'll get you, housefly, for all my sins and yours. This rolled up magazine, my will, my iron hand, will blast the cream of your mysterious insides to the wall. My house is not for you. I'll kill the sight and sound of you. I'll use the accident of me, my middle age, my arc and overthrow. Come here. I'll take our ego down in one great blow, reduce us to a smear, break open your absurd religion, noise, your love of shit, the parasites you propagate, the fat white lie inside the craven heart of each of us. Keep it up, bug. You're free to go, but you don't. Nobody forced you to move in and mock me. Now that you know we are one, do as you choose. But here's my version of you with the news. Rolled Up magazine is the news. Well, climate change poem called Yeast in a Vat, a parable. And on the page, you can see that it's got one line which seems to have grown outside the reasonable bounds of the poem. Yeast in a vat, a parable. The yeast in a vat of sweet grape juice, eat up all the sugar, using it to build more yeast with toxic alcohol as waste till there's no sugar left. Just when the thriving yeast in their billions hit their highest peak of population, awash in alcohol with nothing to eat. We are the yeast, earth is the vat, it is not our fault. I'll now read a rather Jewish poem called The Golem, which is, as you may know, based on the tradition among the Ashkenazim, or Jews of Eastern and Central Europe, that when the ghettos, Sephardic Italian term for a Jewish community that's been segregated from the surrounding community, when the Jews of the ghetto are being intimidated and their children are in danger from hostile outside forces, at least in the Jewish imagination, but quite often in reality, and they have no recourse. There's an omnipotent defense where the rabbi makes a creature out of clay and with God's help animates it so that it can defend the children. And this poem is called Golem. The Golem. One day the Rebbe made a golem. The riverbank is all clay, miles long. Down beside the rushing stream, gingerly stepped the bearded Jew, his canvas bag of sculptor's tools slung across his pious shoulder's shawl, in his hands, twin pails to fill and empty on the wagon's floor. The Rebbe loaded up the cart all day, with all the clay his horse could bear, homeward to the cellar, with its tin chute, down which rolled 104 clay cores, into position by the door. Secret now, they float in air, held there by the Rebbe's mind of humble power. Out now come his tools, some long steel instruments, some wood with loops of rigid wire. He set to work and carved the heap into a giant man, making his trunk of ribs 12 pair, his mighty legs 2 feet, a genital, until the time of truth penultimate, when down into the man's blank front the Rebbe leaned, and with his old hands made the Golem's very face. Magical he moved, conjuring by God the holy name he dared inscribe upon the broad, wet forehead of the Golem. So with his prayers, contentment with his lot, surrender, detachment and attachment, both in moderation, meditation, holy charms and psalms, in haunting melodies sung with shaking. He pierced a pinhole into heaven, through which a free and curious soul swam, willing, into the solid, empty Golem, who blinked. He blinked again. His nostrils flared, and for the first time breathed a breath, sat up and shook his head, smiled, moved to rest his chin upon his knee, and wondered what would be the mission for which he, a Golem, had been summoned into life with holy labor and with elements of earth and heaven. The Golem. These poems, I will now check in with you, are in fact making sense to you, yes? You having a good time? Okay, keep going. This is a poem that I wrote for my parents, and then figured out that I had written it for my parents, and so it's dedicated to them in the book, and it's called "The Meaning of Life is the Location of the Universe." As for life, others lived it before I was born. Others will live it after I am gone. Like you, I am living it now. Until today, this was something I simply knew, but now it has a body like a bird, and the blue fact of it is hovering in front of me. My grandfather died in a bed between two chairs. My dad sat at his left, and I sat at his right. Only 3 places to be, only one at a time. As for life, others lived it before I was born. Others will live it after I am gone. I am living it now. Only stories within life can have meaning. Life as a whole just can't. The universe can't move. It isn't in a place. Only positions inside it are somewhere. Before I'm gone, others will experience youth. House to house, the tracks of them unfurl the dawn's ephemeral ribbon. I miss my mother. She had a nightgown made of silk that hung deep in the walk-in closet. When nobody was home, I crept inside and rubbed the milky hem against my cheek. Others lived it before I was born. The meaning of life is the location of the universe. As for life, I am living it now. Here is a big political poem from Dodo Feathers. I will read 2 political poems from Dodo Feathers. Its final section is the political historical one, a subject domain which dominates my previous book of poems from 10 years before, Limousine Midnight Blue, 50 Frames from the Zapruder Film, which is a collection of 50 14-line elegies for President Kennedy. They're 14 lines in length, but I don't call them sonnets because I prefer a more rigorous construction of that term. Counterfactual. Zeus animates the Trojan horse, which runs away across the plains of Troy as in its hollow belly, cruel embittered soldiers are digested into slime. Teen Hitler, by a thunderbolt, is cored like a pear. Baby Stalin's bladder is turned suddenly to stone. Up swims Christ from fiction, climbs out real from the mosaic emblem in the floor at CIA. By his light are the bones exposed of pimps and bagmen in their secret halls. A wild sleet of molten gold and silver rainfall perforates the screaming heads of Pilate's men, and Jesus dies an old man in his bed. The opposite of hope is not despair. It is the wish for freedom in the past long gone, the unaborted second term of RFK, the Yorkist claim triumphant in the field, Arbenz, Lumumba, Mossadegh, alive and signing legislation with a dodo feather pen. I am falling through the story of my life into the ground. Catch me, angels of the midnight sun that rises in the west. I open Genesis, just checking if it's changed at all. I take my pills and pray to Ingersoll. From a nihilistic crisis of some decades ago. Similar tone of disaffected yet passionately loyal civic disillusion can be found in this piece of verse about a certain rhyming of character between two historical figures who share a name and a taste for tyranny. Richard Nixon at Bosworth Field, which was the battle in which King Richard III of Britain lost his life, the last English monarch to die in battle. And with his death ended the Wars of the Roses forever. My kingdom for a horse, a Pegasus, to carry me across the waves from California to Hanoi, higher than my helicopters, that from her bare back I might cast down through the clouds my soul-destroying iron spear into the enemy myself. My kingdom for a slice of pumpkin pie on china in her kitchen, my mother, whose bliss outshines the sphere of Saturn as above the stars. She passes her immortal days beside the Virgin on her throne in robes of gingham, holds in her left hand a silver scepter, in her right a wicker picnic basket filled with thin ham sandwiches. My kingdom for one of those loudspeaker cars rigged with bullhorns, that I might drive it through Chicago, Dallas, and DC, its fat Bakelite microphone, an apple in my trembling hand, the coiled cord pulled taut. I'd speak again the words I spoke a million years ago into the live machine, the words whose ghost became the 18-minute gap, that spouting hiss of Moby Dick, that Sirens aria, eternal music of the spheres, hidden like the stars at noon, or like the skeletons my namesake made of those two princelings born between my Lord of Gloucester and the crown, who bled to death beneath their uncle's knife, both dead boys he dragged into the closet underneath the stairs below the tower's chapel, undiscovered for 300 years, and then sequestered in an urn, my kingdom for a pint of blood. to raise the voice my death made mute, a pint of blood to feed my homeless shade that loiters in the lobby of the Jefferson Memorial, the mall, the hot coals of the pretzel cart, whose smoke stings gently in the carriage horses' blinkered eyes. My ghost looks out from inside giant Lincoln's giant face of Colorado marble. I can see for miles the frozen grass, plastic bags entangled in a million trees, McDonald's orphaned styrofoam adrift across the lower 48, dioxin, DDT, Mount Arlington's white crosses, finite but unbounded like the universe. If only I could speak, I'd tell you all what words I let escape the threshold of my teeth into the tape. That day the devil came to Washington and took possession of my tongue. You would be grateful I erased it all, the story of your ruin, how my cold demons in the CIA, my mafiosi, my exilios broke into that hotel to steal the future. And 10 years earlier, they did it. Killed the president, injected me and Lyndon with the cold, black bile of God. Richard Nixon at Bosworth Field.
This one? What's it about?
I'd like now to read to you some poems from my President Kennedy book, Limousine, Midnight Blue. That seems like a good segue to do so. And these poems are named arbitrarily as part of the governing conceit which organizes the book. Each is named after a particular frame in the Zapruder film, that 24-second famous and chilling, horrific home movie of the President of the United States being murdered in the street. This poem is Z156. Aristotle taught Athens and the world about the absolute up and down. The universe had a highest point, and its roots were in the ground. This is why the limousine has traction on the road, why skirts and dresses keep the modesty of women, why the shooters have to aim a little high so that the downward love of all things for the center of the earth will not destroy their aim this time. Whatever the math may be, and yet some expedition might find out that near the rising sun, up is down, our night, their day. Look how they wear black pajamas, walking in the water, planting rice under the moon. Here in frame 156, we see the Apollo 11 spacecraft touch down on the surface of Hanoi at high noon. Z174, this poem is spoken by the figure of President Kennedy to his wife. Let's camp here for the night. Under the elms, the fireflies confuse the lights of one another with the stars. The bats flash harmless in the moon. Our tent of midnight blue rides the earth through minutes and a million miles. I married you for something you still have, the way you break men's blonde ideal of beauty with your own jet black. Aphrodite's eyebrows, Hera's giant eyes, milk skin. What you're over there thinking, I have no idea. Lately, you move in a floating cloud behind me. Do me favors, look the other way. Speak Spanish to the Latins who despise us both, French to Paris that adores your clothes. For years, you propped me up. Now pull me down. This poem, Z176, includes a lot of information about President Kennedy as a medical being, which each of us, of course, is, in addition to the moral beings who are responsible for the choices we make. We're also these embodied walking histories. In the race I run with my adrenal glands, I win. When this limousine slows down to imperceptibly creep forward in 3 pairs of distant crosshairs. Pellets of cortisone implanted in my thighs, stacked syringes, and a vast supply reposed in safe deposit boxes coast to coast. Your work is done. The American Medical Association Archives of Surgery for 1955 describes the miracle that I was still alive, an Addisonian, a man 37 years of age. 37 years from now, the AMA will lie about my wounds. I taught them how. Mercury comes for everyone. The psychopomp to lead us down the psycho path. Primroses blow beneath the cypresses to Pluto. Z178. Whatever it was, it's over now. Modernism, money on the gold standard, Mao Zedong, and that enormous bird of dead New Zealand called the moa, like 100 pounds of feathers stuck all over an ornithomimosaur, all just as dead as Prussian peasants in the ground. When I was 9, I found a keychain underneath the pipe where rain came down the roof from gutters and their leaders to the drain, and spread on a depression in the dirt. The 2 keys rusted to a slurry in my hand. This frame brings the left edge of the Stemmons sign almost to the center line. The first shot goes in behind it. This is the cardinal experience of our time. Watching the object shatter and then trying to find it. I apologize if this material is far darker than you were led to expect, but as psychoanalysts, I can well imagine you have every capacity to enjoy this sort of mood by availing yourself of the tragic consciousness to which you are no strangers. So I'll persist. Z181. This is my reluctance to decide, coiling around behind my head to strike me blind. Shot 3 took the bump above my neck where the cortex flashed its final wave fronts of the garish sun. This is my song of promises and lies, making me deaf to warnings and alarms. Shot 1 opened up my throat, so when the sudden angel came commanding me to sing, I could reply like Cadman, I can't sing. This is my deep thought, my long, hard labor toward the fantasy of peace that made me die, shot 4, touched my face, and then removed me from the world. Several others missed and hit the grass, the curb, the stemmen sign. The second came in near my spine. You can have this job, this bitch, these bones. They aren't mine. There's a famous photograph from Trauma Room 1 in Parkland Hospital of President Kennedy's body. And this poem is about that photograph, and it quotes from King Lear at the end. Another photo soon. I'm ripping off T.S. Eliot in the opening line as well. Another photo soon, where like a patient scrutinized upon a table, the great change spreads against the sky in carnadine. My hair looks long because the scalp is hanging off. I have no life to hold my jaw in place, and nobody's here to close my eyes. And so the photograph shows me wide-eyed and slack-mouthed, staring through the ceiling where I read, dead, these sorry lines about my ruin, cold, astonished, mortified. I and my mortal spirit died together on the faint pulse left us after 7 minutes riding in the limousine. Last breath, last rites, last moron asking for my autograph. Take over for me, Ringo, Paul, George, and John. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life and me no breath at all? Because I stopped my war from growing and it murdered me. C-190. And I'll read 2 more poems about the death of President Kennedy, and then put this book aside and read a bit more and be done in a little less than 10 minutes. Z193. Just about now, the fellow on the underpass or by the fence is almost done sighting me, and soon the squeeze will finish and a round will eat my neck. I have about 1 second left to glide along oblivious of just how utterly my plans are gone. My brother's heart destroyed, the gold of everyone turned by usurious warlords into lead, a mile-high mountain of artillery for every raven in the field. I know I'm coming to the end of something, but I don't know what it is. Had I the time, I would climb out of the car and stroll around, shake hands with ladies, lie down on the knoll and read a book, say Moby Dick, where Ahab tries to fish Leviathan from the ocean with a hook. And this poem, too, is spoken in the voice of President Kennedy, though by no means, as you can hear, in his accent. There's nothing regional about it. It was a spiritual phenomenon. Z195. Listen to the poet, reader so dear to me. Let him inside you as he let me inside him. Let him help me speak to you in secret of the man I was behind you in the past that has no life. Now work your thoughts to conjure up my limousine that floated to the cave wherein all sunlight stopped and curtains of the dark blew open to enfold me, and I left myself destroyed on the appalling floor. The foot of my cadaver jutting up and outward from the car, listen to him caring for me. After the morning that went on and on is over with, the sweet fool aping me, loving the oblivious smiler in the picture frame, follow him, touch my empty tomb, and say my name. Limousine, Midnight Blue. Because it's a psychoanalytic audience, I thought it might be appropriate if I were to read a little bit from Sophocles. Here is passage from my translation of Sophocles' Antigone. There are some lines in between Antigone's verses where the chorus speaks to her and she responds to them, and I'll skip those, just read what Antigone is saying. Oh, I am laughed at. Why, by the gods of our fathers, will you not wait until I go, but abuse me to my face? O city, O wealthy citizens, O springs of Dursey River and groves of Thebes, city of radiant chariots, you at least I claim as fellow witnesses by what laws I journey to the prison of my sepulchre. How I go to my unprecedented burial unlamented by my friends. O me, homeless, miserable wretch. Neither with the living nor the dead do I belong. I am not dead, and I no longer live. You have touched on the most bitter of my cares, the thrice repeated heartache of my father's fate and all our wretched destiny, the great Labdacidae. Oh, disasters of the mother's bed, her coupling with her son, my father joined him to her, and her fate was ruin. From such persons I was born to bear my mind in grief, toward whom I go, unmarried and accursed, to dwell with them. Oh, my poor brother, achieving your own marriage, you died, and you destroyed me who survived you. Unlamented, friendless, and unmarried, in mental agony, I lead myself along this road whereof the ending is prepared. Henceforth, in my misery, I lack the right to see the eye of heaven's sacred torch. And among my people, no one groans in mourning for this fate of mine that makes no tears. O grave, O bridal song, O home dug deep below that will be vigilant forever, I do convey myself toward mine own, most of whom Persephone has greeted at the gates of death. And I go down the last and the most criminal by far before my span of life is run. And yet I raise in me the mighty hope as I go on, that I may come into the presence of my Father and be dear to him, dear to you, my mother, and dear to you, my brother. When you died, I washed you with these hands, arranged your limbs, and poured libations on the grave. And now, Polynices, this is my reward for laying out your body. And yet In the judgment of the wise, I have well honored you. Indeed, if I were a mother of children, or if I had a husband who had died and lay decaying, I never would have undertaken this ordeal against the power of the citizens. What is the standard I obey in speaking thus? If a husband of mine died, there might come another, and children from a further man, if I were bereaved again. But from my mother and my father that in Hades lie concealed, no brother ever can be born. By such a law as this, dear visage of my sibling, I have honored you foremost, though by my deeds I seem to Creon to have broken law and taken on and dared things terrible. And now, arresting with his hands, he leads me thus, unwedded, with no song of bridal celebration, nor a share of married life, and no part in the getting of a child, but thus bereft of all my dear ones. I go alive and damned into the hole of dead humanity. How could I evade the justice of the gods? What need I still look to them, whose lot is misery? To what ally can I cry, when I have gained impiety's disgrace for all my piety? And if in the God's sight this is fair, then I shall understand my fault when I have suffered for it. But if these men are in the wrong, may they suffer no more evil than the injustice they do me. Antigone. From Sophocles, the old man in the ground, whom the Athenians revered for his reverence of Apollo, and they called him Dexeos, the receiver, because he won so many tragic competitions and served as quite a competent military general when it was his turn during the Peloponnesian War, that they conferred on Sophocles the honor of being permitted to receive into his home a sacred snake that was holy to Apollo. And Sophocles' love for Apollo is all over his work, especially the three Theban plays. And, you know, in your mind's eye, you can, if you know this story, as people have for thousands of years, you can see in your mind's eye the old man receiving the snake, you know, as the visitor from the god. And the thickness of Sophocles' personal relationship with Apollo, you really come to appreciate when you read the man. And it's not like it's the god is some cog in a mechanical system that you sometimes read about the plays from this left brain perspective, and you see this. No, it's this living thing which pervades the whole body of work and brings it to bloom in the unique context of a psyche working out the traumatic implications of a gift in a historical moment when his community is on fire. So 3 cheers for Sophocles. Thank you so much for the honor of this poetry reading. I love IPBooks and the poets that they publish. I hope you enjoyed this performance, and I look forward to more from my fellow poets in the future.
Would you like to hear some comments from your audience? You can call on people to unmute if they raise their hand.
Hi, Merle. Yes.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Jamey, we haven't heard your poetry. So I hope I can call you Jamey.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm just having a little trouble hearing this audio.
Yeah, your audio is a little shaky, Merle.
Okay. I hope this is better now.
Yes, much.
I don't know why the sound is so poor.
You're getting an echo, so there's somebody else maybe who's unmuted and needs to mute.
Okay, maybe that would help.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like it's helping. Anyway, thank you for everything, because I'm so impressed with your erudition, your literary knowledge, your historical knowledge, and your poetic gift.
that combination is really, really delightful. When I came across one of your poems, reading your book, I was so struck by it because, okay, here, when it's your translations are terrific, and your emotional translations are terrific. But when you were translating the Iliad, and this is on page 30, okay, and you begin, I of course I recognize it, but not in this translation. And this translation shocked me, as I hope it shocks every other person who recognizes this. Anger, sing, goddess of Peleus's son Achilles. Man, oh man, that line grabbed me. Anger, sing, goddess, sing, oh muse, sing, goddess. And it was just such a delight to read and then to hear you read. So thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like someone drinking something, like drinking the poetry. Anger, sing. It's this glottal thing. I didn't notice that. I like that. Anybody want to mention anything? Okay, you're all free to go.
Jamey, perhaps I want to quickly say hi.
Hello, Gabby Schwab. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. We miss you in Southern California, and still I miss the open mic meetings you tried to put on with such great success, and we miss those. And you are still the only person who can see and translate the tragedy in the present time. I don't know that any other poet currently can do that in the same way. So
from you, this means a great deal, Gabby. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. This is Lee Jenkins.
Hi, Lee.
And I just wanted to speak. I got somewhere to go at 3, but this has just been so extraordinary. And you read so wonderfully. It's so powerful. And you bring out the very essence of the thing you're trying to reveal. I mean, the psychological depth of your character portraits. I mean, when you're talking about Kennedy or Nixon or Odysseus, it's authentic. It's very persuasive. It is what we imagine those people to have been like, and the seductive part of the inner self. You know, when you engage in all kinds of destructive stuff and aggression and the revelation of your power. At the same time, the recognition you're going to be held accountable. You get into all that. It's just beautiful. I mean, it's a whole picture. That's how it struck me. So it's not dark. It's a part of what the fabric is. It's all of it. And I just love the way you can bring it out. That was very strong. And when you talked about Odysseus, you know, being lashed to the mast so he could hear the most seductive thing in him. At the same time, that wasn't his only fate. He had to get away from there because there was more that remained for him to do in life. You brought that. It was wonderful portrait.
Thank you. I'm realizing now just starting to realize how fortunate I was in having the audience that I did. This is a real privilege. Mm-hmm. I should mention, because I promised people that I would mention that I am taking new patients, that I'm in private practice in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and I'm licensed in California and New York. And I have a new paper coming out in JAPA in a few months called Being at the Crossroads, a contrarian reading of On Arrogance.
Wow. We look forward to reading it. I was very impressed, particularly the way you have read the poem. It made a big difference. The reading it in a printed way, it's very different, and you gave so much life to it. And I appreciate and thank you for drawing us into your own world. And in particular, I was very impressed about the poems about
Kennedy. I think that just evoked so much strong feelings for me in particular. I'm sure everybody else. I wish we had a larger audience, and I think you probably have had the opportunity in, besides this audience, to read it like in a bookstore or some other setting. It's very powerful poems. I congratulate you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for telling me. So we'll be getting announcements soon as to the next poetry reading in the series, and I await it eagerly. Thank you all once again.
Don't end yet. Just one more word.
Okay.
Which is, just because everything that everyone else said, amen to that. Because boy, you've got it all. But I was very struck by your prosody, reading first and then later coming here and hearing you. But I was very, very taken when I was just started to read Dodo Feathers early on page 23. You have a sonnet. And I can remember the feeling as I was reading it. I was thinking, oh, I know this form, because but it's such a unique sound to it. It's such a 2022 sonnet. And it's so rooted in the history of the sonnet as well. Formally, it is a sonnet that I would recognize in any century. And emotionally, it's so now.
I like it when you don't
my
notice.
ego and my id would stage a mutiny.
I'm sorry?
But that's a line from it. My ego and my id would stage a mutiny. If you felt like reading it, I would love to hear you read it, but I don't know how everyone else feels.
Okay, I'll do that, and then I'll let people go live their lives. So thank you very much for your appreciation of this poem. She's gone, but before I forget, what I was thinking was I consider the use of a literary form successful if I don't notice that the poet has used it until the poem is just about over, which is why I don't like villanelles and sestinas, because they're impossible to write without you getting it. They beat you over the head with it. That's the form. But with a sonnet, you might be able to get it past them before they notice, wait a minute.
The villanelle goes tinker, tinker, tinker bell. Yes.
Yeah. She's gone, but I guess it's not so bad. I would have had to give up all my vices under scrutiny and done big shame when next I screwed up bad. My ego and my id would stage a mutiny, and superego, never very super, would be overthrown, and I'd go wild again. Or they'd surrender in a silent stupor, so my inner boss could boss me till I smiled again. Now there's nobody to change for. I'm too busted up by grief and self-pity lately to bring down major trends in Jewish mysticism off the shelf and dare learn something new. I look at love and piety from outside in a book. Oh yes, I remember when I was stuck at that spot. Thank you very much.